Hello, my name's Clara. I wasn't supposed to come home that night, but something told me to drive back anyway. What I found on the front steps shattered me. My mother, sitting there, trembling, locked out, alone in the cold. And inside, my sister-in-law, glass of wine in hand, warm and unbothered. They said it was a misunderstanding. But was it? Because now I wonder, how long had they been waiting for me not to show up, so they could make her disappear? The street was quiet when I pulled up to the driveway. Too quiet, even for Bellevue in December. The neighborhood had always been this kind of picturesque, snow resting lightly on mailboxes, porch lights glowing like candles behind frosted glass. I'd driven this route dozens of times, but something felt different tonight. The cold didn't just touch the air, it sank into my chest. I hadn't told anyone I was coming. After wrapping up the semester at the high school where I taught art, I craved something familiar. I wanted to surprise my mom. I imagined her smile when she saw me standing at the door, the way her voice always caught when she said my name, Clara, as if just saying it brought her a little peace, but instead of surprise, I found something else. I saw a figure curled near the front steps, hunched over, arms tight around her knees. For a second, I thought it was a neighbor or maybe someone in trouble. Then I saw the scarf, the deep green one I gave her 2 Christmases ago. My mother, Miriam, sitting on concrete, trembling. "Mama!" I slammed the car door and ran. "Mama!" She didn't look up right away. When she did, her eyes were watery, her lips cracked and pale. "I didn't expect you," she whispered, like she was apologizing for something. What are you doing out here?" I was already pulling off my coat, draping it over her shoulders. "Why are you outside? It's freezing." "Why didn't anyone let you in?" She blinked slowly, almost like her body couldn't keep up with her voice. "I warmed some rice," she said. "She told me to leave." My mouth opened, but no sound came. For a second, the wind was louder than everything in my head. I crouched in front of her, gripping her arms. "She who?" I asked, even though I already knew. "She said I shouldn't use the kitchen unless I asked." I stood, my fists clenched. I helped her up, her body light from too many skipped meals. We shuffled to the door. I turned the knob. It wasn't locked. Inside, it was warm. Music played softly from a Bluetooth speaker on the counter. The smell of vanilla-scented candles hung in the air. And there she was, Vera, sprawled on the couch, legs crossed, glass of wine in hand, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. When she saw me, her eyes widened, but not in surprise. More like annoyance, like I'd interrupted something she was enjoying. "You're early," she said flatly. I helped my mother to the couch across the room and wrapped her in a throw blanket. She looked so small, like she was trying to disappear into the fabric. "What the hell happened out there?" I asked. Vera didn't even put her phone down. She was told not to touch the stove without asking. She did it anyway. Actions have consequences. Consequences? I took a step forward. "She's your husband's mother. You left her outside like a stray dog." "She's always pushing boundaries," Vera replied, her tone sharp. "This is my home too. She doesn't respect that. This house was bought with her money. That was years ago. Things change." My voice dropped to a whisper. "Not this." She stood up, now facing me. "She can't just do whatever she wants in someone else's house. She's not someone else, she's family." Vera folded her arms. "She's not helpless. Stop treating her like she is." I stared at her. Not at the clothes, the polished nails, the perfect posture. I stared at the absence of empathy, of decency. "She's not helpless," I repeated, "but she trusted you, and you left her in the cold." We didn't speak after that. Vera sat back down, sipping her wine. I turned away, my hands shaking. My mother had dozed off on the couch, still wrapped in the blanket. Her face was peaceful now, but I couldn't unsee what I saw outside. I couldn't unhear that sentence. I warmed some rice, so she told me to leave. That wasn't a misunderstanding. That was something else, something darker. I headed down the hallway toward the guest room I always stayed in. As I reached for the doorknob, my heart pounded, not just from anger, but from something deeper. A fracture I hadn't noticed until now. This wasn't about rice. This wasn't about the stove. This was about how people like Vera made people like my mother feel small, dispensable, forgotten. I closed the door behind me and sat on the edge of the bed. My breath came in slow, uneven waves. This wasn't just a moment. This was a fracture. The hallway was still dim, lit only by the small wall lamp above the framed photo of our family. Back when Dad was still alive, when things hadn't yet split down the middle, I passed it without pausing and stepped quietly into the guest room, careful not to wake anyone. The house was quiet now, unnervingly so, the kind of silence that sits on your chest. I helped Mom into her bedroom, easing her onto the edge of the bed. Her hands were still cold, despite the blanket and the tea I'd handed her earlier. She hadn't said much after we came in, and I didn't press her. Sometimes, when someone's been bruised enough, words feel like salt. She winced slightly as she laid back. I fluffed the pillow beneath her neck and sat beside her for a moment, brushing the hair from her face. Her eyes fluttered open. "Get some sleep, Mama," I said gently. "I'm here." She nodded, but before she turned her head away, she whispered, "I didn't want to bother you." The words sat in the air like fog. I leaned over, kissed her temple, and walked out. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the empty teacup, my fingers twitching. Then I grabbed my phone and stepped outside to the porch. The cold was sharp again, but not the kind that kept you still. This kind made you move. I dialed Sterling. It rang 4 times before he picked up, his voice thick with sleep. "Clara, everything okay? Did you know Vera locked Mom outside tonight?" My voice was low but steady. "Left her sitting on the steps, in the cold, because she warmed up rice." There was a pause. He exhaled like I was exaggerating. "Clara, come on, don't blow this up. You know how Mom gets. She's dramatic. She's used to the cold. You're making it sound worse than it probably was." I found her shivering, alone, outside, while Vera was inside sipping wine and scrolling through her phone like nothing was wrong. He grunted, annoyed now. "You don't live here. You don't see the day-to-day. Vera's been trying to set boundaries. Mom can't just ignore them and expect no consequences." "She's not a tenant, Sterling. She's not some stranger who forgot to knock. She's your mother." He let out a tired sigh. "Look, this isn't the time. It's late. We can talk tomorrow." "I don't need to talk tomorrow," I said. "I needed you to care tonight." I hung up before he could respond. I stayed on the porch for a moment, watching my breath fog up and disappear into the night air. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something. But what would that solve? Nothing would change unless I did more than feel. Back inside, I checked on Mom once more. She was curled under the quilt, eyes shut, breathing slow. I thought she was asleep until her voice floated up, fragile. It wasn't the first time. I stepped in and sat on the edge of the bed. "What do you mean?" She stared at the ceiling. "There have been other times. Dinners where she didn't set a place for me. Holidays where she said it'd be too much if I joined. I started eating in the kitchen. Less awkward that way." I felt something twist in my chest. "Why didn't you say anything?" She turned to me then, eyes glistening. "Because I didn't want to make things hard for you." For Sterling, You two deserve peace. I thought maybe if I stayed quiet, she'd soften. She didn't, I said. No, she agreed softly. She didn't. My throat burned. All this time, I'd believed Mom was being overcautious, overly polite, but it hadn't been just old age making her quieter. It had been years of being silenced. I stayed with her until she drifted back to sleep. Then I walked back to my room, feeling like I was walking through someone else's house, someone else's life. I sat down at the desk, opened my laptop, and stared at the screen. The cursor blinked, waiting. I typed, "How long has my mother been invisible in this house?" Then I paused. Was this the kind of thing I wanted to keep in a file? No, I wanted to see it, to hold it, to understand what was missing. I pushed back from the desk and walked out into the hallway. The house creaked slightly beneath my feet, like it was reluctant to give up its secrets. And then I opened the drawer in the hallway and found something my mother never intended me to see. My fingers trembled as I gently slid the drawer open. It groaned slightly, like it hadn't been used in years. Inside, tucked between old utility bills and a wrinkled grocery flyer, was a small leather-bound notebook. I recognized it immediately, dark brown, worn at the edges, a faint lavender scent still clinging to it like memory. My mother used to keep it near her bedside when I was younger, scribbling into it while the rest of the house was quiet. I sat down on the hallway bench with it in my lap, unsure if I was intruding or uncovering something that needed to be known. The first few pages were ordinary. Notes about errands, a recipe clipped from a magazine. But a few entries in, her handwriting changed, smaller, tighter, pressed harder into the paper. Sterling told me not to sit on the living room couch when his boss came over, said I made the space feel cluttered. I ate in the kitchen again tonight, didn't want to disturb Vera and her book club. Vera told me my perfume smells old-fashioned. I haven't worn it since. Page after page, year after year, quiet humiliations laid bare in ink. No one had ever read this. It wasn't a diary filled with self-pity. It was a ledger, a record of how someone could be erased, not in one blow, but in the thousand small ways a person gets asked to shrink themselves until they vanish. By the time I reached the middle of the book, I couldn't see the lines anymore. The words blurred under the weight of my own disbelief. I hadn't just missed this, I'd ignored it. I'd chosen to believe that silence meant safety, that my mother's polite smile was a sign she was okay. She wasn't. I closed the notebook and stared at the hallway wall for a long time. The framed family photo hung just above the thermostat, all of us smiling, Vera included. I needed more than memory, more than paper. I needed truth from someone who had seen it happen. The next morning, I drove to a small cafe just past the neighborhood strip mall. I'd messaged Raina, the housekeeper who worked for my brother and Vera for almost 3 years. She hadn't responded immediately, but that morning she wrote back, "I'll meet you, just once. Please keep my name out of it." She was already seated when I arrived, coffee in front of her, eyes scanning every face that walked in. When she spotted me, she stood awkwardly, then sat back down before I even reached her table. "Raina," I said softly, sliding into the seat across from her. "Thank you for coming," she nodded, clasping her hands in her lap. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered. But I saw too much to stay quiet. I let her speak at her own pace. At first, it came out cautious, like she was still afraid Vera might somehow overhear us from 2 towns away. "She never wanted your mother there," Raina said. "From the start, she said it outright. I'm not living with his baggage. She told Mr. Sterling to give her space, to set boundaries." "Baggage," I repeated, barely above a whisper. "She didn't scream at her," Raina went on. "That's not Vera's way. It was little things." She removed labels from the pantry items. Your mom couldn't tell salt from sugar, told pest control to come while your mother was sleeping, so she'd be startled awake, whispered with guests while your mom was in the room so she'd think she was losing her hearing. I sat back, stunned. I thought I was prepared for cruelty. I wasn't prepared for this kind of precision. Did my brother know? I asked. Raina hesitated, then nodded once. He saw, but he said not to get involved, said your mom was just sensitive. I thanked Raina, paid for her drink, and walked to the car in a daze. I sat there for a few minutes, engine off, notebook in my lap. Her entries now had voices, witnesses, context. They weren't exaggerations. They were reports from a battlefield I hadn't known I'd left her on. Back at the house, I scanned each entry in the notebook, creating a digital file. I highlighted dates, cross-referenced events. I added Raina's testimony as a note at the end. Then I printed out the pages. I filed them into a folder, labeled it Documentation MJ, and slid it into my briefcase. Standing in the living room, surrounded by Vera's spotless furniture and curated decor, I whispered, "Let them explain this away." I didn't shout, I didn't slam doors, but the ground had shifted. Something in me was no longer willing to bend just to keep the peace. The sound of Vera's voice from the kitchen faded as I made my way up the stairs, notebook still pressed against my chest. Her words echoed in my ears. "She's digging. If we're not careful, she'll burn everything." I didn't need to hear more. That sentence told me everything I already knew. She was hiding something. Back in the attic, I switched on the small desk lamp that barely lit the dusty corners. The heat didn't quite reach this part of the house, and I could see my breath hanging faintly in the cold air. A stack of boxes lined the back wall, unlabeled, untouched since the day they were shoved here. I pulled one toward me, fingers stinging from the chill. Inside were old tax folders, faded receipts, utility records, and beneath them a manila envelope labeled House Deed plus Legal. My heart jumped. I pulled it out carefully, opened it, and found the original deed. The paper had yellowed at the edges, but my mother's signature was bold, unmistakable. Her name, Miriam J. Alvarez, was listed as primary owner, with Sterling's name handwritten in later, under Authorized Party for Maintenance Permissions Only. My breath caught in my throat. That had been 15 years ago. I set the document aside and reached for my laptop. The county property records portal was easy enough to find. After a few clicks and a short search, I saw it. Sterling W. Alvarez, sole owner. No mention of Miriam, no co-owner. Not even a transfer history that referenced her. Something had been erased. I leaned back, recalling a conversation from years ago. We were having tea, just the two of us, and she'd casually mentioned helping Sterling with the down payment. "I used part of your father's pension," she'd said, like it was nothing. "Just wanted to make sure he and Vera had a good place to start." Back then, I thought it was generous. Now, I saw it differently. Help never meant disappear. The next morning, while Mom was still sleeping and Vera had taken Bryony to school, I brought up the deed. Not as an accusation, just a question. "Mama," I asked, sitting beside her on the edge of her bed, "do you remember signing over anything about the house?" She blinked slowly. Yes, Sterling and Vera said joint ownership was messy. Something about taxes. They had me sign a clarification form so there wouldn't be confusion with the city. I looked at her for a long moment. "Did you read it?" She looked down at her hands. "They told me it was routine." My throat tightened. "That was a title transfer, Mama." Her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't speak. She didn't have to. Later that day, I began documenting everything. I scanned the original deed, highlighted the property ID, noted the transfer dates from county records, and saved it all to a secure folder. I labeled it clearly for anyone who might ever need to see it. Then I opened my email and typed, "Sterling, we need to talk. You know this house was never just yours, Clara." I didn't sign off with love or your sister. I wasn't interested in being polite anymore. I closed the laptop, walked to my journal, and scribbled one sentence across the page. This isn't about property. This is about erasure. That evening, I went downstairs to get water. As I approached the kitchen, I heard Vera on the phone again. Her voice was sharp, low. "She's digging. If we're not careful, she'll burn everything." She paused, then added, "Don't tell Sterling yet. He doesn't need the stress." I stepped back into the hallway, unseen, my pulse steady, not from fear, but clarity. They knew what they had done, and they knew I was coming for the truth. The next morning, as I poured coffee into a chipped mug I'd found in the back of the cabinet, a calendar alert buzzed on my phone. Bryony's Suite 16, 3:00 p.m., the Lakeside Club. I stared at it, blinking. No one had told me about a party. I scrolled through texts, double-checked family threads. Nothing. Then I saw it, posted casually by Vera the night before, a boomerang of Bryony twirling in a dress shop, captioned, "Can't wait to celebrate our girl. #Suite 16, #family first." No mention of Mom. I went into the living room. Mom was already dressed, sitting by the window in her cardigan, a small gift bag in her lap, pale blue with a white ribbon and a handmade card tucked just inside. "You're up early," I said. She gave me a soft smile. "I wanted to wrap this while it was still quiet. You know how Vera likes things done a certain way." I sat beside her. "Did you get an invite to the party?" Her smile faltered. "No, but that's okay. Sterling said it's mostly for Bryony's friends, and someone needs to be home to feed Max." "Max, the dog, of course." "Mom, you don't have to lie for them," I said gently. "I'm not lying," she replied. "I'm choosing peace." I didn't say anything. There was no peace in this, only pretense. By 2:00, Vera's voice rang through the house. She barked a list of last-minute instructions, drop-off times, food allergies, what flowers to load into the car. Sterling barely said a word. Bryony walked out in a sparkly dress that clashed with the weather, her curls pinned high and glitter on her cheeks. She didn't look at Mom. No one did. By 2:15, the front door slammed shut behind them. Mom sat back down, still holding the gift. "I think I'll just rest here a bit," she said. "It's nice to watch the trees sway." I nodded, unable to speak. Then I grabbed my keys. At 3:05, I parked outside the Lakeside Club, a glass-walled event center overlooking a foggy lake. Through the windows, I saw gold balloons, rented linen, trays of sparkling cider. Vera stood at the center like she owned the air around her, one hand on Bryony's shoulder, the other clutching a champagne flute. I stepped through the side door, catching sight of the slideshow playing on the big screen. Photos of Bryony growing up, from baby photos to high school headshots. Not a single one featured my mother. I found Sterling outside near the patio heaters, phone in hand. "You knew," I said, stepping beside him. "You knew Mom wasn't invited." He didn't flinch. "It's not that simple, Clara. She bought that house. She raised you. And now she's at home, alone, while your wife celebrates family in a building she didn't even help pay for?" Sterling looked away. "You don't understand." "You're right," I said. "I don't understand how you can pretend like this isn't disgusting." I turned and walked back toward the door, not expecting a response. He didn't give one. Later that night, back at the house, I found Mom sitting on the porch again. The gift bag was beside her, unopened. "Was it nice?" she asked. I sat next to her. "It was what you'd expect." She nodded. "That's good. Bryony deserves a nice birthday. I wanted to scream. Instead, I reached into my coat pocket and handed her a slice of cake I'd taken from the buffet. She smiled, took a bite, and said nothing more. Around 10, I went upstairs to lie down, hoping to sleep. My phone buzzed. A text from Vera. "You're not helping anything. You live in Portland. You've always been outside." No greeting, no signature, just that. I stared at the message for a long time, not because it surprised me, but because it didn't. The next morning, I called a friend of mine, a lawyer who specialized in elder care and family asset fraud. "I need to know what qualifies as financial abuse," I said. She asked questions. I gave answers. When the call ended, I looked in the mirror and said aloud, "I'm done asking nicely." Then I went down to the basement where the old security system box was kept. Years ago, I'd helped install it when Vera wanted peace of mind while traveling. I remembered setting it up myself. Passwords, camera angles, storage backup. I opened the server closet and pulled out the hard drive. It still worked. The upload bar was almost complete. Just a few more seconds before the entire folder of audio, video, and screenshots would be backed up to the cloud. My fingers hovered over the post button, heart pounding, breath caught somewhere between rage and resolve. And then the screen lit up with an incoming call. "Bellevue General Hospital," the caller ID read. I answered on instinct. "Is this Clara Alvarez?" the nurse asked. "Yes," I replied, already standing. "I'm calling about your mother. She was brought in about 20 minutes ago." A neighbor found her unconscious in the backyard. Backyard. My purse was already in hand. I was in the car before the nurse finished giving directions. The roads blurred. I didn't even remember turning off the ignition when I got to the ER entrance. When I stepped into the hospital room, the beep of machines greeted me. My mother looked so small under the sheets, pale, frail, more so than just a few days earlier. A bruise had formed on her temple. "She hit her head," the doctor explained, "likely collapsed from fatigue and dehydration. We also noticed signs of malnutrition. How long has she been living under this kind of stress?" How long? That word again, that cursed question. I stayed by her side until she stirred. When her eyes opened, she looked disoriented at first. Then she saw me. "Clara," she whispered, "don't make a fuss." I didn't respond. I just held her hand. Later, when I returned to the house to gather her things, I walked through the living room like a stranger. The house didn't feel like a home. It felt like a stage set. Perfect furniture, immaculate kitchen, a life curated for appearances. I went straight to the server cabinet in the storage room and pulled up the video archive from 3 days prior. And there it was. The pixelated footage showed the front door opening. Vera stood in the frame. My mother was holding a dish towel and what looked like a glass of water. Vera didn't yell. She didn't scream. She simply stepped forward, pressed her hand to my mother's shoulder, and guided her backward, out the door, across the porch. Then she shut it. My mother stood there for a second, stunned, before slowly stepping down the stairs. She sat on the bottom step, cradling the towel, unmoving. I hit pause. My throat burned. "This isn't a misunderstanding," I said aloud. "This is a pattern." Hours later, Raina messaged me. "Check your email," she wrote. I opened the file. It was a voicemail recording from her old phone. Vera's voice was unmistakable. "I don't care if she cooked. I don't want her hovering. This isn't her house. If she stays here, I leave. I'm not sharing space with a guilt trophy." I replayed it. Guilt trophy. I forwarded the clip to myself, saved it to the folder labeled Evidence, Daylight, and added timestamps. I sent the full file set to Sterling with a single subject line. "Still think this is just family drama?" By the time Vera got home that evening, I was seated at the dining table, laptop open, folder of documents spread out in front of me. My mother was still in the hospital, but this wasn't going to wait. She stepped inside, saw me, and instantly narrowed her eyes. "What the hell are you doing?" she snapped. "I think you know. You went through private systems, security footage? Do you know what you've done?" "I know exactly what I've done," I said calmly. "I exposed the way you treat someone who deserved better than your polished cruelty. You think you're some savior because you flew in from Portland and played detective for a week?" "No," I stood, facing her fully. "But once a year is still more than you ever gave her dignity." Her face twisted, the mask cracking. "You have no right to interfere. This is my home, my family." I leaned in, voice steady. "She is my family. You're just the woman who forgot what that word means." She turned and stormed upstairs, slamming the door behind her. I returned to the table, collected the evidence, and laid each piece out. Neat, factual, undeniable. Then I took a photo of everything and uploaded it to a shared drive. I typed out a caption to accompany it on my personal page. "If they won't listen in private, maybe the public will." But before I could hit post, my phone buzzed again. "Clara?" The nurse's voice was tight. "Your mother's awake, but we need you here." I grabbed my keys. By the time I got to the hospital, the sky had turned that flat gray Seattle winter loves so much, colorless, indifferent. I rushed into the ER without checking in, already knowing which room to head to from the nurse's earlier call. The hallway was long, the overhead lights too bright. The beep of monitors echoed like a metronome to my rising fury. Miriam lay still in a hospital bed, eyes closed, her skin washed out beneath the fluorescent lights. A thin bandage was taped at her temple. Her hands, always so careful with sewing needles, teacups, quiet gestures, now lay limp on the scratchy blanket. The attending physician met me just outside the door. He was young, polite, and overly cautious with his words. "She collapsed in the backyard," he said. "A neighbor saw her lying near the shed and called 911. Luckily, she didn't lose consciousness for long, but her vitals, well, we're concerned. Severe dehydration, moderate hypothermia, signs of undernourishment." I didn't say anything. He added gently, "The fact that her phone was found off, frozen inside a plastic soup container in the freezer, that raised a red flag for us." I blinked. "Wait, what?" He nodded. "It was zipped in a freezer bag. She couldn't have done that herself." "No, she wouldn't have." I stepped into the room. She looked at me, barely lifting her head. "Clara," she whispered, trying to smile. "Don't make a fuss." She always said that, even when we should have been flipping tables. I held her hand. "You're safe now. That's what matters." But inside me, something cracked, not like glass, more like ice, splitting down the center. That evening, I called Sterling and Vera. I didn't ask. I told them to meet me at the hospital. Sterling arrived late, eyes heavy with fatigue or guilt. Hard to tell anymore. Vera didn't show. Instead, she sent a text. I don't respond to threats. I met Sterling in the hospital's family waiting area, a private space near the nurses' station. I laid out the paperwork across the table, the printed photos from the front porch camera, the deed with Mom's original signature, transcripts from Raina, the notebook. "This is everything," I said. "Everything you chose not to see." He looked at the table like it was on fire. "Clara, this is a lot." "I don't know what you want from me." I held his gaze. "Respect? Accountability? Maybe even a thank you for the woman who raised us both." He didn't argue. He didn't even sit down. He muttered something I couldn't catch and walked out. The door clicked shut behind him like a closing verdict. That night, I went back to the guest room, sat at my laptop, and composed a post to our extended family group, the one with all the cousins and aunts who shared baby pictures and recipes like clockwork. Attached, one photo from the security camera, one line from the notebook, and a voice memo of Vera's clipped comment about the guilt trophy. Caption: "You don't have to raise your voice to cause a wound. Silence is enough." I clicked send. Then I forwarded everything, footage, audio, documents, to 2 local elder care organizations. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but I wasn't waiting for justice to arrive by invitation. The next few hours were quiet, save for the ping of group messages. Reactions varied, some horrified, some defensive. One cousin asked, "Are you sure this isn't just family stuff? We all have drama." I didn't answer. Around 10, I was brushing my teeth when my phone rang. Unknown number. Local area code. I let it go to voicemail, then checked the transcript out of curiosity. "Can I talk to you alone?" It was Bryony. I called her back. She picked up on the first ring. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said quickly, "but I saw what you posted, and I didn't know." "You didn't know your grandmother had been locked out of her own home?" "I didn't know it was that bad," she whispered. "Mom always said she was dramatic, that she liked playing the victim." I closed my eyes. "What do you want to talk about? Can we meet? Just us?" I hesitated. This girl had Vera's eyes, but not her armor. "Where?" "I'm outside your building." I looked out the window. Sure enough, a car idled near the curb. A figure stood beside it, small, shoulders hunched against the cold. "I'll be right down," I said. I grabbed my coat and made my way down the stairs without turning on the light. The air outside had a chill, but it wasn't the kind that cut. It steadied you. Bryony stood at the bottom, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her hood pulled low. She looked smaller than I remembered, unsure of where she stood in her own home, or maybe in her own family. "I didn't know where else to go," she said quietly. We stood there a moment before I opened the door and let her in. She stepped into the hallway, not quite looking me in the eye, her hands shaking slightly as she unzipped her jacket. "I didn't come to defend them," she said, glancing toward the living room like someone might be listening. I needed to understand what happened." "You saw the post," I said. It wasn't a question. She nodded. "And I saw the photos, the notebook. I don't know how I didn't see it before, but now I can't stop seeing it." She took a seat at the kitchen table, and I poured us both some tea, nothing fancy, just chamomile from a box. We sat for a long time, not speaking, until she finally broke the silence. "Would it be okay if I came to the elder care event tomorrow? I know they're honoring your mom, and I think she deserves someone to clap for her who never really did before." I looked at her and saw not the daughter of Vera, but a young woman trying to unravel the silence she'd inherited. "Of course," I said. The next afternoon, the community center was filled with folding chairs, a modest buffet table, and a podium adorned with a handmade paper banner that read, "Honoring Our Elders." It wasn't grand, but it was real. People were there who remembered my mother, not for how she fit into someone else's image of family, but for who she was. Agnes, one of my mother's oldest friends, was the first to speak. She walked up with her cane and stood tall behind the microphone. "I've known Miriam since before she was a mother," she began. "She used to walk to work in the snow so Sterling could sleep in before school. She'd pack his lunch, iron his shirts, and stitch his backpack when the straps wore thin. Not once did she ask for thanks." A few people in the room sniffled. I felt Bryony shift beside me. "And she didn't stop giving after that," Agnes continued, "even when her name was no longer on paper, even when the people she gave to stopped looking her in the eye. When it was my mother's turn, she stood slowly, assisted by a volunteer. She didn't carry notes. Her voice, when it came, was soft but full. "I won't use this time to name anyone," she said. "I won't speak about pain to hurt, but I will say this. The coldest day of my life wasn't outside. It was standing in front of a door I helped pay for, one I opened for others, and finding it locked behind me." The room fell into complete stillness. "I forgave them," she added. "But I remember." From the back of the room, I caught Sterling rising quietly and walking out. Vera was there too, her face frozen in a smile that didn't quite hold. She didn't clap, but the rest of the room did. Bryony rose beside me and clapped too, slowly, then with certainty. Later, when we got home, my mother sat in the sunroom, knitting a scarf in the same shade of blue as the one she wore that day she'd been left on the porch. She didn't say much, but the rhythm of her hands spoke volumes. "She's amazing," Bryony whispered. "Yes," I said. "She is." In the days that followed, things shifted quietly. Sterling's name disappeared from 2 public law firm panels. Vera withdrew from her position with a local senior care campaign. No public statement, just a line in a press release. Due to personal matters. And Bryony moved out. She started visiting my mother every Thursday, bringing books and tea, sometimes just sitting with her and listening. A week later, an email from Sterling popped into my inbox. Subject line, "Let's talk." His message was short. "Mom deserves to move back. I know I was wrong. I don't expect forgiveness, just conversation." I didn't reply immediately, not because I didn't know what to say, but because, for the first time, I finally had the power to decide if I wanted to say anything at all. I let Sterling's email sit in my inbox for 3 days. Not because I was unsure of what to say, but because, for the first time, I wasn't obligated to answer out of guilt or duty or some worn-out sense of familial role-playing. I had nothing to prove, nothing to defend. Mom and I had settled into the rhythm of our new place, a modest apartment tucked behind a row of townhomes near the park. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. The living room faced west, and in the afternoons, sunlight pooled on the carpet in a way that made the space feel warm even on the colder days. Our lives became quieter, not from lack, but from choice. Every morning, I'd make coffee while she sliced fruit. Some mornings we walked, others we sat on the patio watching kids bike past or neighbors wave from their dogs. There was no tension, no side glances, no eggshells underfoot. We spoke freely, and when we didn't speak, the silence wasn't heavy. One night, I brought up Sterling's message. "He asked if you'd consider moving back," I said gently, watching her face. She didn't flinch. Instead, she finished knitting a line of stitches and smiled slightly. "I already did," she said. "Here." That was that. We didn't need to have the same conversation over and over again. She had made her choice, and so had I. I did meet Sterling once, a week later. Neutral ground, a cafe near the library. He looked tired, older than I remembered, and his handshake was more hesitant than firm. "I know I messed up," he said, skipping over pleasantries. "I should have listened to her more. To you." I nodded. "That's true. I thought keeping the peace meant staying quiet." "No," I said. "Keeping the peace meant standing up when someone was being wronged." He stirred his coffee, then looked up. "Do you think she'll ever forgive me?" "She's not the one who needs to," I replied. "You need to learn to live with what you let happen." We left it there. No yelling, no scenes. Just a quiet understanding of damage done. Vera never reached out. Bryony told me that after the elder care group made her step down from 2 boards, Vera retreated. She wasn't angry, just gone, not from the world, but from the illusion she'd built. "She's fine," Bryony said once, "but she knows. And that's something. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. There's a kind of peace that comes not from victory, but from clarity. One afternoon, I found Mom sitting on the couch, knitting a new scarf. "It's the same color," I said, recognizing the soft gray blue. She nodded. "This one's not for warmth, it's for memory." We didn't speak for a few moments. The needles clicked softly, rhythmically. Later that week, I drove by the old house. I hadn't been back since the hospital. It looked the same, paint still fresh, porch still neat, like nothing had happened, but I knew better. I parked the car, stepped out, and walked up to the front steps. No one answered the door. I didn't knock. Instead, I placed a single white rose at the threshold. I stood there for a moment, not in anger, not in sadness, but in resolve. This was no longer my mother's home. It never truly had been, not in the ways that mattered. As I turned to leave, I thought about everything she'd given, everything she'd endured, not for praise, not for recognition, but because she believed that love meant giving until it hurt. She gave up everything for us. The least I could do was make sure the world remembered her, not as someone who waited at the door, but someone who deserved the keys. Sometimes the ones who suffer most aren't the ones who scream the loudest, but the ones who stay quiet the longest. This story isn't just about family betrayal, it's about finally seeing the people we've taken for granted and asking ourselves, what would we do if the door was locked on someone we love? If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We've got more real, powerful stories coming your way, ones that remind us that silence has a cost and truth always finds its way to the surface.